Morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Jesse Armendariz. I am your Inland Valley Association president for 2021. Been in real estate since 2002. I've been past chair of the LCRC and a past board member, and I just want to thank you all for coming out and taking the time out of your busy day to hear what we have in store for you today. And I will let Mark take it over. Mark?
Great. Thank you, Jesse, and welcome everybody. This is our monthly first Wednesday of the month meeting. Normally it's live in a non-COVID situation. However, we're all making the adjustments and hopefully staying safe and healthy. So let me get to the introduction of our guest speaker today. And it's going to be, I think, a good meeting. We're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. If you do want to ask questions, please use the chat function that's available to you via Zoom. And then we'll have time at the end if you want to pull yourself off of mute. We can take questions that way as well. So with that, let me jump into the introduction of our guest speaker today. It's Mr. Phil Burum. Phil is the vice president at DR Horton's South Coast Inland Division. He's currently also vice chair at the governing board of the Building Industry Association of Southern California and past two-year president of the BIA Baldy View chapter. In his role with DR Horton, Phil's primary responsibilities include land acquisition and analysis. In his more than 20-year career in real estate industry of Southern California, Mr. Burum has been responsible for the acquisition and entitlement of over 7,000 residential lots and the development, construction, and sale of more than 2,000 lots and homes located throughout the Inland Empire. In support of his passion for advocating for home ownership, Phil spends much of his time working with local government agencies to help find solutions to alleviate the housing shortage in Southern California, in part by finding rational and reasonable entitlement solutions for land throughout the region. So let me quickly kind of define what the BIA, or the Building Industry Association, is. Just as we have a realtor association that represents realtors and sales agents and brokers, the Building Industry Association is a trade association that represents home builders. So as IVAR is to realtors, the BIA is to home builders. So that's the relationship between the two. He'll be going back and forth today, answering questions, sometimes as a DR Horton representative, sometimes as a BIA representative, but I'll let him figure that out as I ask questions. So with that, I want to welcome Mr. Phil Burum. Good morning, Phil.
Wanted to make sure I was unmuted. Good morning, Mark. Thank you. And thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So maybe you could just take a couple of minutes, tell us a little bit about your role with DR Horton and your responsibilities and what that entails, and then also kind of talk about your involvement with BIA as well.
Okay, great. As far as my role at DR Horton today, technically I'm accountable for land entitlements and feasibility management acquisitions. What that really means is I help keep the pipeline of lots flush for our home building business plan. I help resolve processing issues whenever we encounter unforeseen difficulties, I'll say, in the processing of permits or plans. Most of my job is interacting with local officials, whether it's electeds or agency department heads or inspectors even, and landowners. My goal is to help try to find solutions that'll turn a vacant piece of dirt into a thriving community. So for Horton, it's about keeping the pipeline filled so we can continue to build homes. As far as the BIA, it's a bit more macro than that. It's more industry related than project specific. When I was the chapter president, Carlos Rodriguez, who's watching this call, and he'll proverbially kick me under the desk when I say something out of line. But he had me, we spent a lot of our time working with the local agencies on development code updates and zoning ordinances, and really trying to negotiate to set the best stage possible for new home communities to come online. Whether that was literally meeting with the community development director about updating their development code, or meeting with a mayor and council about how to find ways to expedite or outsource their plan check processing. As we came out of this recession, when home building really kicked it into gear again, and candidly, it still really hasn't, but in 2013, most cities were still staffed as if it was 2010. So I think when I was chapter president in 17 and 18, I think, cities were still ramping up. So Carlos and I spent a lot of time trying to work on ways to get things out of a logjam and into process. For BIASC, the Southern California governing board role is even more macro, where I spend time with the executive committee, kind of talking about the general business plan of the Building Industry Association. I don't really do as much direct interaction with local agencies anymore. We kind of try to set the agenda for staff, monitor state, local, and federal legislation, monitor project advocacy at a local level. If you hear about the city of Anaheim building up a group of people to try to oppose a project, we'll try to make sure we're geared up to step in with advocates for it. Generally speaking, just kind of help craft and spread the message advocating for housing. That's
Good. So as you proudly pointed out to me right before we started our meeting, DR Horton is the largest home builder in the country. Maybe you can address some of the Inland Empire projects you guys are working on.
Yeah, we're a merchant. DR Horton's a merchant builder. And for those of you not familiar with that term, the lion's share of our business plan is to acquire lots that are ready to build homes on. There are many home builders that combine, or there's a distinct difference between home builders and land developers, some that do both. DR Horton certainly does both. Candidly, my whole reason for existing in this division is because I do entitlements. So we are starting to acquire more vacant land and developing it ourselves. But the lion's share of our plan is as a true merchant builder. That's what we do best and what we do better, candidly, than anybody, which is why we are the largest builder in America. Thank you, Mark.
So as far as the product type and the types of product that you're building from a housing standpoint, is DR Horton focusing on certain types, smaller cluster homes, large homes? I mean, maybe kind of walk us through the thinking as far as construction in the Inland Empire.
Yeah, that's going to be probably about a 45-minute answer. So I'll do my best to not bore everybody. Our division, which is Inland Empire North, is kind of north of the 91, extending out to the Coachella Valley in the east and LA in the west, including coastal LA. So most of what we're doing is infill. We're not the typical buy 500 acres and do 3,000 lots at once type of a builder. Most of our communities are 50 to a few hundred lots and homes. What we're focused on right now is finding a way to bring density to the Inland Empire without necessarily having to go attached. Attached housing started hitting our market in the IE probably right before the recession. Townhomes became more prevalent. Condos have always been around, but townhome living became more prevalent. Our division, not a huge fan of attached. So we've been trying to find ways to develop high density communities while still having single family detached living. And I'm going to throw kudos at your president right now, because while he was on the council in Fontana, we brought probably our most progressive land plan to the Inland Empire while he was serving on the council, which is broken ground now, and our models will open in June. But it is a single family detached program of homes that will range from about 1,700 to 2,300 square feet on 2,700 square foot lots. So the homes are 26 feet wide, the lots are 34 feet. And I don't want to get into too many details, but this is an important description of what's coming to the Inland Empire. Is these homes, what I referred to them when I was processing them with the city, when we were doing the entitlements with the city, is I kind of called them detached townhomes. They live like a townhome. They're 26 feet wide, so they're kind of narrow and they're deep footprints, but they live like a single family home. They all have 15-foot backyards. They all have 18-foot front yards, and they're not attached to anything. They're all 2-story homes, but it gives the homeowner the ability to afford a home without having to be attached to his neighbor. So really applaud Fontana's kind of forward-looking thinking, and that product yields about 10 units per acre. Whereas I don't I'm sorry for jumping to the density yield, but for most of us that have grown up in the Inland Empire, looking at a town like Eastvale, when Eastvale was developing, they had the minimum 7,200 square foot lot standard, and just everything in Eastvale was 7,200 square feet. Comparatively speaking, this is a third the size, just in the broad scope of things. And this is, we believe, the way the Inland Empire is going to have to go. A 7,000 square foot lot is an estate lot, we think, in today's housing market demand. There's just not enough land to do everything on 10, 15, and 20,000 square foot lots. So really, I don't want to oversell enough how important it was to have Jesse's support on that project. Even staff didn't quite understand it. So to solve the housing need, density is the way to go. We're there at the Inland Empire.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that Fontana and Jesse Armendariz, when he was on council, is taking the lead on that. Prior to my IVAR days, I did development projects, and I did one in Fontana, and we tried to do that specific product. It was a detached product. It was 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, small lots, 2,700 to 3,300 square feet. And unfortunately, at the time, the city didn't even have that in the development code. They looked at us like we were crazy and said, we don't even know what to do with this type of product. How is that working now with other cities? Are you seeing other cities adopting that within their general plans and housing element to allow that type of construction?
Yeah, it's a process more than an event. Carlos and I always talk about this is a marathon, not a sprint. We're trying to set ourselves up for the future. So it takes a minute to get the conversation going. Even in Fontana, the reason we were able to do it and candidly do it so efficiently is because we were in a specific plan, so we could write our own code. But what the goal was is we wrote the specific plan, so now staff can replicate that development code and bring it forward so it's an allowable use throughout the city. But we are working right now with cities like Victorville, who still has that 7,000 square foot minimum. We're walking them through, but at the same time, you have cities like Hesperia that just did a voter referendum for half-acre lots. So although we think most cities, especially in the Inland Empire, understand the need for density, understand the need to provide housing, and candidly, with the state's threat about using RENA as a funding matrix for local funds, I think most cities have embraced it to satisfy their arena needs, and forgive me, regional housing assessment needs. Again, I don't really know fully my audience, so if I say something, Mark, just stop me.
No worries, you got it.
But yeah, the cities are starting to embrace it, but it's a process.
Yeah,
Like Montana, Ontario are certainly at the lead of things. Candidly, other than Fontana, the most aggressive city that we work with is Adelanto, because they so badly need housing that they're looking for any way that they can to appeal to developers to come that way. But
good old Adelanto, good for them. So there's kind of two things. One is if you're a merchant builder, you're basically coming in and getting lots that have essentially been approved, and you can start the construction process based on a pre-approval. There's a time frame to get a project like that done versus buying undisturbed land and then taking that all the way through CEQA to get the approval and then build. What's the time difference between the two of those? And I know that a larger project is going to take longer, but kind of briefly trying to outline how long does it take to actually take a project through from the raw land standpoint versus the merchant building approved lots?
You said briefly, we could take the weekend.
Yeah.
Go through this. As far as a finished lot ready to pull a permit and deliver a home, our build cycle for most of our product is 3.5 months. So if we acquire a piece of property, it usually takes us a week or two to get the lots prepped, and we're off to the races. 4 months later, we have occupancies. When you are taking raw land to the point when you can deliver your first home, although some of it's going to be topography and development restrictions, it could take you 3 months to a year to develop the land. Most of the time you spend is just negotiating your approval process with CEQA. So I think that as terrible as this range sounds, I never give credibility of range when someone says, yeah, it could be 70 to 100% more expensive. Well, that's a 30% variance. So I never give that guy credibility. But in this case, It could take 6 months to 5 years to entitle a project. It really depends on the local, candidly, the local politics. The environmental conditions of the project do play a role, but also whether the city embraces development or doesn't embrace development can slow down or stop a project.
Right. Have you found yourself talking to city officials about higher density projects, and their concern is building higher density in their minds creates ghettos or slums? And or when you talk about building more affordable product, in their minds, they believe that they're, quote, attracting people that they may not want in their cities. Have you seen that kind of feedback from city officials?
Yeah, not quite that deliberate or that direct, but you can always hear the tones of, I don't want those people.
Yep.
There, but I think that there's just a horrible misconception about that. As one of the conversations that Jesse and I had as we were talking through this concept of these smaller lot homes, is great homeowners make great neighborhoods. That's the difference. It's not about their income level. Candidly, home ownership makes great neighborhoods. We were part of a study that Cal State San Bernardino did a few years ago on housing and home ownership. In my view, the reason I do conversations like this is I'm a true believer that home ownership cures very near every social justice issue in the country today. When you own a home, and when the percentage of home ownership is higher, crime is lower, graduation rates are higher, advanced education rates are higher, personal net worth is higher. I think in America, at the age of retirement, the average person that retires as a homeowner has a net worth 20 times higher than the average person that retires not owning a home. So although I am never one to speak against rental housing, in my mind, that's the transitional housing or the people that need to bounce around. But if you're ever going to live in an area for 3, 4, or 5 years, it's all about home ownership. It cures everything. Those people are more involved in the community. They're more likely to be a room mom or dad or a football or baseball coach in the community. The people that own homes invest in their communities, and that's what prevents neighborhoods from declining. So it's not about the size of the lot or the price of the home. It's about the ability to get people a home that they can afford.
I agree 100% on that. Can you think of an example maybe where DR Horton was going to build a project, there might have been some community resistance, and you were able to triumph and get the community to buy in on it? Can you think of any examples where you were part of that?
Every one I've ever done.
Yeah.
Candidly, the community that we're proposing in Fontana, because it was adjacent to an existing neighborhood and we had to meet with the homeowners association to kind of give an idea of what we were doing, there was a lot of initial resistance. But I think once you talk people through the logic of what a new home community does, and in my experience, and you guys are the real estate professionals out there that have to deal with the resale market, so I'm sure someone in this audience will correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen a new home community detract from the value of the surrounding neighborhood. You can suppose it will, and you can go, well, those homes are smaller, so my value is going to go down. I've never seen it in history.
No.
So if someone could ever show me that and prove me wrong, I would love to have it so I could stop touting that fact. But I think once you have that conversation, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned a moment ago, the majority of a person's individual net worth for most Americans is in their home. So it's a very personal thing when there's a threat of devaluing their home. So I think every conversation starts off with, what are you going to do to me and how it's going to hurt me? But typically speaking, in my experience in life, we've been able to get them to understand what we're really bringing. And not everybody's going to be a rah-rah cheerleader for us, but I've never had a project that had so much resistance it wasn't approved.
That's great. From a local government standpoint, if you were to, local government controls the land use for the largest percentage of it. I mean, obviously there's a role at the county, state, and federal level, but local government, city government has the largest control. If you could give a couple words or suggestions of advice, what would you like to see cities do differently? And I know that might be different for certain cities, but from a policy standpoint, and Carlos, I know you're on the call right now. If you want to jump in on this from a policy standpoint, what do you think cities should be doing differently to help address and promote more housing development?
I'll start and then Carlos will correct me.
Okay.
Efficiency in the process. There's not a lot that can be done at the local level to fix CEQA. At some point, some state elected official is going to tackle it. But as much as everyone, even Jerry Brown ran on that, he was going to fix CEQA. But until that's tackled at a state level, local governments just have to deal with it and find the best way to do it. But predictability in processing and timelines. I was speaking recently to, we talked about Adelanto a minute ago, to Jesse as the city manager in Adelanto. What I'd be curious to see is a measurement from what most cities have, what they call a pre-application process. That's where if you have unentitled land, you can show them conceptually what you want to do. And that way you don't have to spend $30,000 designing the whole project. Say, here's my idea. What are your general thoughts? So most cities have a process like that. I'd be curious to see how many made it from the pre-app process to a building permit, because it's that processing timeline in between those two events that kills projects. We often talk about builder fees, impact fees being a detriment and a deterrence to housing, but if the fee is known and predictable, I can quantify that. What I can't quantify is the timeline to get from my application to, as you described earlier, Mark, the building permit. And that's what kills projects. If I think it's going to take me 3 months and it takes me 12, it's death.
The old adage, time is money. Carlos, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think Phil hit it right on the head as far as certainty in the process and avoiding delays. Let me take a moment to again thank you for the invitation to BIA and to your president, Jesse Armendariz, who served with distinction and was really just tremendous in his leadership on the Fontana City Council. And we've enjoyed a great collaborative relationship with IVAR over the years. I mean, once upon a time, I even had a satellite office in our Rancho Cucamonga office. So just being able to work closely with your leadership and you in particular, Mark, and your team has been very helpful as we really try to look at the challenges of housing and the housing shortage and the housing crisis with being working alongside one another. We ultimately, with what Phil's talking about and bringing more supply, ultimately those are going to be the homes that the realtors are going to be having access to and having clients for. So we have about a 70,000 unit shortage in San Bernardino County. We need to build in California about 180,000 units a year. We built roughly 80,000 units a year. So we've had a chronic pent up demand for many, many years. And what has happened is, if you take San Bernardino County, you can pick a city, none of them are immune to this, is what you see is with that shortage and a spike in pricing, your realtors can attest to the competition to outbid one another. It just makes it very challenging for a family, a dual income family, to be able to afford a home. What we're seeing is because of a lack of supply, both on the purchase side and the rent side, that lack of availability is increasing the pricing, and as a result, you see families having to live together, 3 to 4 families in a rental, or those types of situations has put San Bernardino County 9th out of 58 counties in residential overcrowding, meaning more than one person per room.
Right.
So the solution is really, at the end of the day, not looking at the current housing element updates in the arena. We've talked about that term. Essentially, every 8 years, cities are allocated a responsibility to zone and to identify locations for different types of housing at different income levels. So what the exercise shouldn't end at identifying locations and saying, well, it's up to the builders to build it. Cities have a responsibility as is regional government, as is state government. There's policy levers, not to mention federal government, that they all could be responsible for. And if a city identifies 7,000 unit locations for low income, moderate income housing, yet they have a environment where Phil has to go in and it takes them 2 months to get a response to their first plan check, and they have to go through 6 iterations of different plan reviews. That level of uncertainty will kill projects and really create a challenge to get homes on the market. Not to mention if there's an environment, not only a dysfunctionality and planning and engineering, but there are, we want to pay our fair share for fees, but $50,000 to $60,000 per unit that DR Horton and other builders have to put towards infrastructure, which we want to do our fair share. But when some jurisdictions want to have public art, and they have a fee for that versus roads, schools, and parks. We understand that. So the higher fees, the lack of certainty, those are issues that ultimately, if cities are focused on what they can do to help move projects through and keep, maybe Phil can talk about the types of designs, the architectural designs that are added that could add $20,000, $30,000 a home. When you look at through the lens of how can we bring more projects to the market, cities have a responsibility in the arena planning to look at their policy side so that it's not just figuring out where locations are and then saying we wash our hands of that.
Right.
And that's what the goal for us is, to have those conversations, be collaborative, work with IVAR to voice those concerns, and ultimately get more folks into a position of homeownership.
Right. I saw there's a question coming through, but let me ask this first question. Phil, as far as COVID, obviously realtors have had to adjust this last year relative to how we do business. And we're seeing kind of a shift in the market relative to people often looking at from LA and Orange County that are looking at the Inland Empire as a more affordable region, either on the rental side or on the purchase side. We've always been that, but now with distance working, it's more so an attractive environment out here. Have you seen COVID had much of an impact on DR Horton from a development standpoint, or how you're marketing or anything?
I'll say it's had a theoretical impact. A measurable impact, it's hard to measure net. I mean, I had a partner once in my prior life when I was with a private builder that used to joke, we'll know when the recession happens 6 months afterwards. Where I am with COVID, we'll really know the impacts of COVID on design and land design probably a year or two from now. But it certainly has more of a conceptual impact on our planning. People are talking about remote learning. It's forcing, not remote learning, remote working. A lot more people in this industry that have realized they can work just as effectively like you all are doing right now from home for 20, 30, 40% of their job, that you don't need to office somebody for a lot of the work that needs to be done. So I think the Inland Empire is going to continue to benefit from that. The restrictions that we've had, well, in truth, since 1980, other than the Great Recession, we haven't really had restrictions. People get tired of prices downtown, so they drive east until they can afford it. We now have homes selling in the Inland Empire for $2, $3, $4 million, $5 million. Well, obviously Cleveland Avenue and Corona, there's probably $10, $15 million ones, but it's not unusual to live in $1 million tract home in Rancho Cucamonga. So we are attracting the more upper end white collar businesses that traditionally stuck with Irvine or coastal LA. In addition to that, we're taking advantage of the people that have realized that they can telecommute. So I think that our opportunities are endless. We still have land. That's the old joke is, well, it's not an old joke, but there's more land in Inland Empire available to build than there is in LA and Orange County. So we're going to continue to have growth as long as we have local agencies that embrace the growth and permit the growth. And Carlos did a great job of describing some of the hindrances But on the overcrowding issue, I want to make sure I have this one bullet point that I did make note of before this. And Carlos mentioned the overcrowding. If we reduced overcrowding in San Bernardino by just 1%, we would have an equivalent increase in graduation rates, according to this study that San Bernardino, Cal State San Bernardino did. And in minorities, it's 1.5 greater. So the secret to everything is more housing. And
Here, here.
that should be my mic drop moment, Mark. But
No, we're not done yet. So I got a question. Doug Shepard asked a question. He says, could Phil or Carlos discuss the role of special assessment in HOAs? Oftentimes builders, when they go into a particular area, they're either kind of encouraged to have an HOA relative to the project, or there's a variety of special assessments, mellow roofs, on and on and on. How do those impact projects?
Both are a double-edged sword. The reason I think that the mellow roofs legislation passed originally was for, candidly, urban sprawl. As you get further out from existing development, the infrastructure requirements to get a project off the ground are just exceed the ability for development. So the way to tackle that in many cases is by infrastructure taxes. So in other words, if you had, I think someone recently, there's 500,000 approved map lots in the state of California that will not go to final map or development simply because of the infrastructure demands. And what that really means in simple terms is it cost about $60 million just to get to the point when you can build a home. And most developers, that's a terrible business plan. To invest $60 million to hope you can sell one home for 500,000. It's just, that's what keeps a lot of homes off the market. Now, the way to overcome that is to finance the infrastructure on a Melrose, or what other people call it, a community facilities district tax. So I think that was the origin of what it is. As far as what it means to the market, I think it does provide a tool to enable developments to move forward that otherwise might not be able to. So it's a great tool to have in the tool bag. The other side of that sword is home buying is becoming more like car buying to the consumer, where they're buying based on monthly payment more than price of home. I mean, you guys all know that you're going to have to, okay, if this home's worth $420, there's no sense, you can't pay $430 for this home because it's an equivalent value, and you're going to walk them through their appreciation. But at the end of the day, it's about what they can afford to pay. And more homeowners are becoming more sophisticated in that analysis. Whereas before, you could have a 2% tax rate and a $300 HOA. And because of their experience in the resale market, they think, well, this home's $400,000. It's the same as that home, it's $400,000. Well, it's not. For every $45 that a homeowner pays in either HOA or CFD tax, it's equivalent to about a $10,000 value on a mortgage. So everything DR Horton does, we don't analyze prices anymore. We analyze payments. So for example, there's opportunities that we're buying in properties now that have opportunities to offset, call it $10,000 in development impact fees through a CFD. But because of this price point, that would also cost me 0.3 of a point in tax payment margin. So I would go from a 1.7 tax rate to a 2% tax rate. Now that $9,000 quote unquote income that I got cost me revenue of about $30,000. So when you do the analysis, I think each site has to be analyzed individually. There are tremendous benefits to CFDs, but there's also hindrances on the selling side of it down the road. Each project is an individual thing. If it's the only thing that gets the lots out of the ground, all over it. If it's a way to try to, the idea that it's a way for a builder or a developer to try to make extra money is a farce, at least at this point. It might have not been in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think there was a lot of people jumping on that bandwagon before home buyers understood what the tax rate implications were. Now they've outsmarted that. As far as HOAs, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I think HOAs, when handled properly, when set up properly, do great things to maintain the neighborhood aesthetic and maintain values. They can also just be animals that destroy neighborhoods. I think that I'm in favor as a homeowner of the idea of living in an HOA, because I don't want my neighbor to paint his house purple with stars on it. But I get, there's nothing more frustrating than having trash cans left on the curb. So I think that there are tremendous values to HOAs, but it's like home ownership, like humans, it's all an individual approach. If it's not
Right.
operated properly with the right people in the chairs, it can hurt you more than help you.
Right. Or the dreaded garage door that's left up overnight or something.
Right.
Um,
The
okay.
California basement in the garage and no one parks there. That drives me. But sorry.
All right. If anybody has any questions, please hop on the chat or pull yourself off mute or let me know, and we can ask either Phil or Carlos Rodriguez a question. Let me just say this. Are there any, so realtors deal with that all the time relative to showing properties to clients, and the property value may be the same, but the property tax basis and special assessments can be substantially different and therefore much more expensive. And obviously we deal with that all the time. So I appreciate you giving a little bit of background on that and why it happens and the purpose of it as well. Any other thoughts relative to Inland Empire development? Where do you see this region going? And do you see more high density projects starting to kind of bubble up and make their way through in our communities?
I do. I think at our division, we found a great niche in the first time and first move up buyer. So we have really done tremendously well in the Coachella Valley. We have 6 communities going on in the Coachella Valley and 7 in the high desert, or I'm sorry, it's called the Mojave River Valley these days. If you haven't caught onto that, let's start using that term for the high desert. So we found great opportunities there. We still like the core markets of Cucamonga, Ontario, which is where we're finding most of our density opportunities. The Jurupa Valley area is a region that is poised for growth. They're starting to staff up at the city level. So we're optimistic you'll start seeing a lot of growth in Jurupa Valley and Moreno Valley. I think that these core commuter markets are set up geographically very well for new housing, but a lot of them haven't yet understood or embraced the high density. You're still seeing high density more likely to occur in Rancho, Ontario, Fontana, than you are in some of the more tertiary markets, but it's coming.
Yeah.
It's natural. It has to happen.
Does DR Horton do any attached rental product, or do you guys do only for sale?
Nationwide, we have a rental division, and every home we build has the potential to be a rental. It all depends on what the market's going to do. We always have, I think, a great business plan for a builder is to have many different exit strategies. So we do have a division nationwide that does rentals. There's nothing in Southern California right now that we're doing that's a rental, and we as a division have chosen not to do attached right now.
Okay.
So we're avoiding condos and attached home, but that's just a business decision.
Okay. Phil, one of the challenges that our members are having right now is just the lack of inventory and the frustration of working with buyers and showing them property after property and submitting offers and not getting anything accepted. On the new home side, if our members are interested in finding out projects in the region that DR Horton is building, and I believe you guys offer a co-op, which is fantastic, where would they go to find information on projects you have that are either coming up in the future or are currently in the pipeline that are being built right now?
We do, and obviously that's not my side of it, so I'm not really sure how all that works. But if you just Google DR Horton, you'll find out more information than you ever wanted to know about where our communities are. I think our marketing team does a great job of highlighting our future and current communities. One thing I do want to mention, Mark, that I don't know how I missed this in our conversation, but there's two major points I wanted to discuss today. And one of them is, why can't we build more? And we talked a little bit about the processing. We know the demand is there. I mean, candidly, if I build 10 homes, I know I'm going to sell 10 homes. In today's market, as long as we bought it right, built it right, you know, the demand is so strong that we're very confident in the demand of the market. But one of the reasons we can't build as fast and as much as to satisfy the demand that would provide more product for you guys, part of it is the processing, but part of it all is also the labor force. And just for your guys' edification, and when the recession happened, 90% of the labor in home building went away. They all lost their jobs. Most of them haven't come back. They've gone into other careers. They considered it a volatile market. So right now, we don't really have the labor force in place to build to the production we're building now. We are scraping and scrumming, booking things 8 weeks in advance that we used to book 3 weeks in advance because the demand is so high on the labor force. The cost of production has gone through the roof. Lumber has literally increased 20% just in the last 3 months. I think it doubled last year. So the cost of production is going crazy. Labor force is off the charts. So that's keeping us from candidly oversupplying the market, which is why I believe the demand is the home building market's going to be nice and stable for the next 3 or 4 years. It doesn't feel like there's a way to satisfy the demand. And then the second thing on the processing end, you mentioned at the very beginning, you have 4,000 IVAR members. And one of the questions that I always hear when I'm talking to cities and areas is, how can we help promote housing? Come to a public hearing. It doesn't matter if it's in your neighborhood or if you know much about the project. Take 3 minutes on the comment card and say, I don't know anything about the projects on the calendar tonight. I just want you to know I'm in favor of new housing, and walk away. The council needs to hear that. Oftentimes you have a very favorable city that wants to be progressive and develop, but they get beat up so bad by NIMBYs and people that just don't understand the benefits of housing that they have to react to it. So the more people like you that understand the benefits of housing that can go and take 3 minutes, even if there's not a housing project on the agenda, just walk by at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night in the city of Beaumont and say, I just want to let you know I'm in favor of smart growth and in favor of housing. Thank you for your time. I wanted to get
No, it's
and
great.
just if I can just add to that, it's such an important point. We could have the greatest solutions, and if we don't have the political will, you'll be amazed what can happen when 20 boisterous homeowners come in and say we don't want that project, and we see time and time again great projects die. And when you're talking about, Mark, the supply that or lack thereof, it is one of the best takeaways today for your members would be if you could, Mark, share my email address afterwards with them, and they could just email me and let me know, hey, I'm willing to go on Zoom at the appropriate time and make a comment, because there's no bad projects. I mean, after you go through CEQA and you're gone through the gauntlet of planning and engineering, our members are bending over backwards to accommodate concerns from the community. There are no bad projects. So we just need to have that cover. We need to have a face that I live in this community. I'm a realtor. I live in this community. I support this housing. And now today with Zoom, they don't need to leave. They can just do that from their home. So if there's a way that we could work together, I think now more than ever, we need that, because we have an attack on all sides. It's never been more difficult, from the atmosphere in Sacramento, the hundreds of bills that are coming down, to regional requirements. Now, won't get into all of the idiosyncrasies, but we are now required to have Phil, the state is saying, Phil, DR Horton, you need to figure out how each of those new homes, those residents, you need to change your design to reduce the vehicle miles traveled by those homeowners. So you have to reduce the vehicle miles traveled by a certain level in order to your project to be able to be approved. And so how do you do that? We don't know yet. No one knows, but that's a requirement. No one knows that. We don't know if it's going to be a design, or we asked the governor, please wait so we can figure that out and don't implement this new law in July. And he unfortunately didn't do that. So I give that as an example of the uncertainty, the challenges, environmental challenges, CEQA abuse, NIMBYism. We need the realtors now more than ever to be that voice of reason, that conscience in the community. So if there's a way that you could share my email after this, and any of those folks that are watching today that say, hey, I'm willing to make a 1-minute comment, just call on me, Carlos, when you need me, that would go a long way.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. If you want, you can actually type your email into the chat line, which anybody can access. And also at the end of this, we'll record this meeting. It'll be on IVAR's website and we'll have your contact information listed there.
I'm having problems with that right now. So
Okay.
it's Carlos at BIAbuild.com. Carlos at BIAbuild.com.
Fantastic. Okay, we're wrapping up here. One more question. If anybody wants to get a last second question and type it in right now, but let me just ask, Doug Shepard asked a question regarding the labor issue, which is if there's a labor shortage, are builders and or the BIA either locally or statewide doing anything to address that through internships or training programs or anything? Are you aware of any programs?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know that you're trying to wrap up, but yeah, the BIA has what they call a BITA program, which is a training course that goes to that we offer courses in Upland High School, Redlands, several local high schools, and Chaffee College. Here's the challenge with COVID, there's no lab work.
Yeah.
And construction training is an in-person thing. So although we were really pushing and getting a whole lot more training registrations going into 2019, 2020 came and our registrations fell to nothing. So as an industry, we recognize without labor, there is no industry. So we're working to implement new training programs. San Bernardino Community College instituted a new program with our help where they actually asked us to help develop the curriculum. And they did a program of to prevent recidivism, where they had I don't want to say parolees. There's a more correct word for it, but people coming out of the justice system, getting job skills training on a grant, and then be able to come right into a job situation. So a lot of our membership participated in that, helped develop the curriculum, and did a job fair for the graduates of the program. So we are working to do it. The more that we can spread the word on the benefits of this training, and as I will flippantly say often, our biggest issue, I'm on a council committee with Fontana Mayor, with Aquanetta Warren, shoot, I forgot it. The schooling, it has all the local school districts and a
Okay.
few people. And I know it'll be really quickly about this, but what I always say in that is we just need to make construction sexy again. That's how we're going to get younger people into the trades, because it's one of the fastest paths to a six-figure income for talented people that exists today.
Very good. Thank you so much. And with that, I want to again thank you, Phil and Carlos, for participating today. Hopefully everybody learned a few things and had some insights and questions answered. That wraps up our meeting for today. We will be back again on March 3rd. We're going to have a property management forum where we have a number of people and attorneys speaking on various property management issues that everybody's dealing with right now, COVID and otherwise. So looking forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you all again and have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.